Take it away, John.
Okay. Sorry for all that technical back and forth. Let's try to make up for some lost time. We have two candidates with us, Brian Reese and Aaron Whiteley, both running for county commission seats. Aaron is running for the 6th district, and Brian is running for the 3rd district. Thank you for joining us today, you guys, and let's go into the questions. The first question is, the recent city election was historic, as voters basically did not return any of the incumbents. What's your takeaway from this dramatic outcome? Aaron, why don't you go first?
All right, so first I want to just thank you, John, and your colleagues for putting this on. This is awesome, and it's unfortunate that we have to resort to measures like this during these challenging times. Nonetheless, I appreciate you putting it on, and my heart and prayers go out to our very own healthcare professionals who are dealing with this tragedy, and any families who are dealing with losses. Now, in regards to the city elections, personally, I was very encouraged. One of the things that I think played a big role was there was a tremendous push to just get people to the polls, to get people active. And so what I think we are currently seeing is a change or a shift where people are paying a lot more attention. They're not necessarily listening to what people tell them. They're going out and finding out for themselves. Social media, which could be a double-edged sword, is also kind of playing a role in being able to get information out. And it's slowly but surely encouraging people to get involved. Another thing that I think played a big part is the fact that we are in a divisive political climate on a national scale. And with that, with national divisiveness, you have a sense of responsibility, if you will, where you feel the need to get involved to try to stand up for what you believe is right. So I think that is what we saw with the city elections. I'm very encouraged by it.
Okay, thank you. Brian, same question for you. What's your takeaway?
My takeaway is very, very simple, is that first off, we see a historic amount of voter participation in a citywide election during a non-presidential year, which was really a great aspect. I think that the city of Savannah was crying out for change. I think they were crying out for authenticity. I think they were crying out for people who genuinely wanted to represent them and do better. I think that the mixture of the council right now is a good mixture, and have opportunity to really do things differently than we've done in the past, and include as many Savannians or Savannians in the process as much as possible. I don't think it's going to be easy. Faith makes all things possible, but not easy. But I think that they are able to meet the task that's at hand right now. So I think it's good for the city of Savannah, and I think that we're going to see good results once they can begin to coalesce and work together even more.
Great. Let me be specific in this next question. Almost every city council candidate that won in November and the runoff in December advocated having term limits for all the city council, not just the mayor, at 2 terms. Do you guys as candidates for the county commission believe that that would be a good policy for Chatham County government? And Aaron, why don't you handle that first?
All right, first, if I can ask everybody else, like Glenda Jones, to mute your program, because all the background noise it switches your view. Thank you. Yes, I'm an advocate for term limits across the board. I personally believe when you have term limits, it keeps elected officials honest. myself being included in that. I think it's important that we have new ideas that come along. And of course, whenever you have term limits, I think it limits the notion of getting comfortable in a seat and almost, in a sense, taking ownership of the seat. That seat belongs to the citizens who elect whomever that representative is. And so when we have term limits, I believe that it creates a sense of, okay, I was elected in, I need to get busy. I need to get to work now. I may only have this one term, or I may only have 2 or 3 terms, and that's it. And then
Right.
it also, I personally believe, will cut down on corruption. When you have not had the opportunity to sit in a seat for an extended period of time, you are, in my opinion, a little bit less susceptible to corruption and cozying up with deal makers.
Sure. Yeah, on the commission, I mean, you got one commissioner that was there when I was there. So he's been there 20 years. You've got another one that's been there 16 years. So the same thing exists on the city side. So I appreciate your answers on that. Just quickly, what would you do to develop a closer working relationship with the city of Savannah, assuming that that's something you believe in? And Brian, why don't you handle that?
Well, first off, I already have a working relationship with a lot of the aldermen and city officials in the city of Savannah. But remember, in the county, we have multiple municipalities. So in the third, you have Thunderbolt, you have Garden City, and you have to have a working relationship with all of those municipalities. And one of the things you have to realize is that we have to collaborate. We have to be on the same page, and we have to find venues where we can collaborate together so that people know that everyone in their prospective areas, whether it be the 3rd, the 6th, or throughout the entire county, are working for the best interest of the county and the cities and municipalities within the county. The first thing is that, let's talk about economic development, right? Does the economic development program, do they encompass all of the cities or just the largest municipality? Are they working within the city of Thunderbolt, Garden City, to develop economic development across the board in the county, or are they just working for the largest municipality? That's where you want to begin, and that's where I would start.
Okay, thank you, Brian.
Can I chime in on that?
Sure, quickly, because we lost a lot of time in the technology transfer, but please go ahead.
Yeah, I think one way that we could do that is if we as Chatham County as a whole take on the, for lack of a better phrase, big brother role to take on the task of helping to train and develop a workforce. With that, we're training and developing workforces within the municipalities. So then we work hand in hand with the municipalities to create workforces that ultimately could transfer into enticing businesses to come and actually bring their businesses here. But I think the way that we could foster that is also just by creating a spirit of inclusion and transparency amongst the municipalities.
Great. Thanks for that. Let me switch over to the subject of SPLOST, that special purpose local option sales tax, the 6th penny in our sales tax continuum. SPLOST ballot language is controlled by the county. It's a county sales tax. Would you support including on SPLOST ballots all major projects listed so that the voters make the decision on which SPLOST projects get funded and which do not? And these would only be the top tier projects. Brian, you want to handle that question?
Sure. I don't think that we should actually put it on the ballot on which projects get funded under SPLOST. I think that because those projects are related to a particular area or a particular municipality, like you may have a SPLOST project that's being handled in Garden City that the Garden City municipalities want to see come to pass, but the city of Savannah doesn't. So I think that becomes something that could actually divide us. you may get a large turnout in one area to say, hey, we want to fund this. And then we may have a large turnout that says, look here, we don't want to fund it. What I do think the SPLOST needs to do is that we need to find ways to create emergency funding out of SPLOST. All
Okay,
right.
I'm coming up on that question.
So,
But hold your thought for just
hold
a
your
minute.
thoughts. Okay.
And Aaron, what's your take on the idea of top tier projects the voter has the ability to accept or reject on his or her ballot?
I'd be interested to hear. First of all, I think to quickly answer the question, potentially, but honestly, I'd be interested to hear from past elected officials, past county managers, city managers, to kind of get their take on it. But most importantly, see what my community thinks about it, because just like Brian was saying, it could, in essence, create a spiteful divide. And at the same time, it could murky up the ballot. And as we saw, when we have a lot of referendums and whatnot on the ballot, then it can confuse people.
It could be a very long ballot. I grant you that, and that's one of the obstacles.
Mhm.
So let me continue on the SPLOST line. Would you support, including on SPLOST ballots, sort of a truth in lending statement that says the estimated annual maintenance and operation cost for this project is going to be X amount of dollars every year? The major projects definitely impact that M&O budget. SPLOST funds can't be used for that. So how do you feel about giving the voter some picture or idea, estimate of the ongoing costs to maintain and operate a big SPLOST project? Aaron, why don't you keep going for us?
Again, that'd be something I'd want to hear from the constituency about. Personally, I don't think that's necessarily, I don't think the ballot is the place for that. I think if we want to get that information out, we should invest in resources to put it out and send it out to our constituents, to the community. I don't necessarily think that the ballot should be the place for that.
Okay, so at a minimum, to jump in here, at a minimum, as public meetings are being held to talk and discuss the SPLOST project list, at least there, don't you think that the city government or the county government ought to inform the voters, hey, this particular project is going to cost us X amount to maintain and operate, so that in those discussions in advance of voting?
Yeah, yes, sir. And yeah, to be clear, I do agree with that aspect, to say, okay, all right, yeah, we're going to build a multi-million-dollar facility, but this is how much it's going to maintain, how much it's going to cost to maintain it. However, that could ultimately become a negative tool to, in essence, encourage people to not vote for it because they're afraid of the ability to maintain it, and not necessarily the positive effects that it may offer. So, that's a touchy subject. I think it'd be more important to hear from the citizens, whether it be using mailers to make sure that we're touching every citizen, as well as public meetings. We definitely need to have input from the community on that one. I don't think that should be something that's solely made, a decision that's solely made by the commission. All
right, but it sounds to me like the idea of kind of a full disclosure and transparency on SPLOST, you're in favor of.
Absolutely. We got to know what it costs to maintain it. That's in all fairness.
Okay. Thank you. Brian, what's your take on that idea?
The bottom line is citizens elect us to be as open and as transparent as possible.
Correct.
So I would support letting the public know, hey, this is how much it costs. This is how much it costs to maintain. What the public also needs to know is there any return revenue on us funding this project? One of the problems that we have in government is we never look for an ROI, return on investment. What is our return on investment should we fund this project? And when will this project pay for itself? All right, either through taxpayer dollars or through actual use of the facility, whatever means comes about. So, hey, it's going to cost this amount of money to do X, Y, and Z. We expect it to cost this much in the form of how much it costs to maintain this facility.
Sure.
And this is the amount of money we expect in revenue over a period of time should we fund this project. Those are the types of things that the public need to know.
Right.
When I'm doing business with someone, I need to know, well, hey, if I invest in you, what is my return on investment?
I like what I'm hearing. We're talking about transparency. We're talking about accountability. We're talking about metrics, and this is all good. Let me do another SPLOST question for you, and this goes to our current coronavirus situation. Would you support a legislative change that would allow cities or counties to borrow some of their SPLOST deposits for a statewide declared emergency? And Aaron, why don't you handle that?
Probably not.
Okay.
And here's why. I don't think that we need to get into a process of petering and polling. I think that fiscal responsibility and accountability should be on the front end of things, not on the back end. And with that being said, understanding the current times, we need to make sure that we are implementing measures that will allow us reserves for challenging times like this. One of the main reasons that I would oppose that, at least theoretically, I of course want to hear from my constituents, would be that it will start to get muddy when we talk about how that money gets put back. Sure. And the other question is, from what fund or what SPLOST project, in which order are we taking it from? And so ultimately what I think it could become is a means to downplay or push back certain expenditures that have already been approved and voted on, SPLOST wise, of course. It creates a way to push that stuff back, and ultimately it goes into that cycle of perpetually we'll get to it.
The cookie jar syndrome is a problem, and they're very thoughtful of you. How would the money be repaid? There's a lot to explore. Brian, have you answered this question?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
I have a slightly different take on it.
Okay.
It is amazing how we can have a pool full of water and still die of thirst. And that's kind of my outlook on it. I think the issue that we have right now is that, yes, we have all this income. We have an emergency that is a valid emergency, that's a statewide pandemic and a national and global pandemic, but we can't use any of that revenue to heal the people. My take on it is that it should be made available in small portions, and it should be extremely specific as to its use.
Okay,
right?
you would put a cap to how much?
I would put a cap. I would put a cap. Okay. I would say, hey, it has to be specifically used for this, but I agree with Aaron that we should already have a contingency budget for this type of incident. We should already have something in place for a pandemic going on. So for us to go into SPLOST would be the last resort that we had to use to make sure that we stayed to the level of civility that we needed to stay at.
Well, the context here was in a radical emergency situation.
A radical emergency. Now,
let me spin this next question because it builds on the previous question. Would you support revising the SPLOST laws to allow some portion of SPLOST collections to be put in an emergency fund for extreme conditions or statewide emergencies?
I want to answer that first. Yes, I would, but here's how I would do it. I would put it in an emergency fund. I would not use that money in an emergency fund at all, but the interest from that money on the emergency fund would be used for emergencies. So, prime example, let's say we put $100 million into an emergency fund. I don't know, I'm just bringing up a number. And the interest on that money is now used as an emergency fund instead of actually using the money.
I like what you're saying, because currently,
So that way that money stays in the budget the way it needs to stay in there. But we have interest, and that interest is built up for just this type of situation where we're not costing the taxpayers any additional revenue. And then now we don't have to find a way to pay back money because we use it for the emergency or get a loan. We're actually giving ourselves a loan on funds that are creating a profit for us.
I like your thought on that. Let me play it back to you to see if I understand it. Since currently, when SPLOST deposits come in, they're put into an account for a specific project. That project may take 5-10 years to come to fruition, and the money for that project that's already collected in bank is accruing interest. So what you're suggesting, Brian, is that instead of setting aside a reserve out of the general SPLOST totals, all the interest that may accumulate could
become your reserves.
I like it. I like it because so much of the SPLOST interest is used to funnel through change orders, which are cost overruns, and only fattens up the contracts for those SPLOST projects. So I think that's a 2-for-1. I like that idea. Thank you. Let me move on to the next question. This has to do with the Chatham County Police Department. The department has approximately 110 officers to service a population of 92,000 people in the unincorporated areas. That's a ratio of 1.3 officers per 1,000. According to national data, that's a low ratio for a suburban police department. Do you see a need to increase that ratio to the average suburban ratio of at least 1.5 officers per 1,000? And Aaron, why don't you handle that?
All right, so safety is by all means tremendously important. And when we look at how the police department has been working now, it has been working pretty well to my understanding. Looking at the numbers, though there have been some reclassifications, generally speaking, crime has, there's been a reduction or at least a sense of better coverage in the unincorporated areas. I think when it comes to deciding that, it'd be important to trust the chief, make sure that we have, as individuals, as commissioners, make sure that we're doing some research to find more efficient means to source our police force. And I think it'd be important to utilize technology. See, if we were to have some of the similar technologies that are being used within Savannah, that ultimately could cut down on the need for those people. So having a bulked up force, if it's not efficient, isn't necessarily the answer. So I think it'd be important to rely on the subject matter experts for that, but also do our own research in that and trusting the chief.
Fair enough. Thank you. Sir, Brian, you have a...
Yes, I believe we need to bump up to 1.5. It's a no-brainer for me. I mean, bottom line is that I believe we need to be at 1.5, which is the national average for an unincorporated area. I think you need more officers to cover the area.
Yeah,
we got to remember though that the Chatham County area, when you're looking at it, it doesn't completely encompass metropolitan areas. So if we're going to gauge ourselves on national averages, we have to make sure that we have the full picture in mind. I mean, if you look at I'm curious to see an example of one of the cities that we're talking about or the areas that we're talking about. But 1.5.
Aaron, that's kind of a national suburban minimum number. Rural areas dip below the 1.5 to 1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. But I really think that the unincorporated area of Chatham County is more a suburban model than a rural model. Anyway, I appreciate your thoughts on that, you guys. I want to move on to the next question. 89% of the county's M&O budget comes from property taxes. Less than 40% of the city's M&O budget comes from property taxes. Where could the county raise more recurring revenue from without increasing property taxes directly? Brian?
Well, I thought about this, and I'm gonna be very, very delicate on how I actually answer this question because I don't really know all the information. So I know that the city of Savannah has a hotel motel tax. And my question is, does the county have a hotel motel tax for unincorporated areas? And do we encourage development in unincorporated areas such as hotel motels? Because the tourism industry, right, we always focus it on downtown Savannah.
Sure.
But there are a myriad of beautiful areas that tourists can go within our area. Chatham County has Thunderbolt, it has Tybee, there's parts of Garden City. I mean, there's other areas we can go. So my question would be, how do we get a tax without taxing our citizens? And that would be to tax those who visit the Chatham County area. So, you know, that would be where I would begin to look at. I don't know if that would be the only place I would look at, but that's one of the areas I would start.
Okay. Aaron, have I asked you that? I'm sorry, I'm losing.
No, you hadn't.
Okay. Well,
I agree. I agree with Brian in that I'd like to be equipped with a little bit more information. Now, one thing that I think we could consider are franchise fees for different large entities that are coming to work with us. Another thing would potentially be something like in lieu payments, you know, where, for example, and this is just an example, SCAD has buses that run to operate, you know. Their buses are impacting our environment as well as our roads.
Sure.
We have a bus system.
Would you level a fee for that transportation usage?
Yeah, I'd look at, well, again, armed with all the information, potentially, yes. You know, we'd have to look into different measures, but that is something that we do have to look into, period. As our community grows, we have to find other measures to bring in revenues.
Yeah, and not just constantly pass it on in property tax.
To the consumers, right.
Okay. One idea that since 1990, many counties have gone to implementing impact fees on new construction to help defer the costs associated with growth in those areas. And it's a one-time fee assessed to a new construction project. New Hampstead is a perfect example. Chatham County has not adopted an ordinance allowing impact fees, though it's constitutional and has been and widely used since 1990. Brian, would you have any qualms with considering an impact fee schedule for new construction in unincorporated Chatham County?
Impact fees go back even farther than that. They go back to 1960s, and then in the 1970s they became widely used. I would not be impact fees. Let me say it this way: I would not have or be against impact fees, but I would put specific guidelines on how they operate and when they operate. So I'll give you a prime example. I was reading about impact fees, and when I looked at them, I saw that for new home developments like urban housing, you know, they were charging impact fees. Well, that may not be an area where I would want an impact fee to occur, additional cost to develop or build my own house. But I have seen where impact fees have been implemented for large construction. So where you have multiple units or a large development plan, you may want to put an impact fee in there because of how much it's changing the landscape.
Sure.
And
Well,
the
Brian,
tax there.
you would have as a government the ability to modify your impact fee schedule. For instance, if you're short of affordable housing and a developer is going to create a certain number of units as affordable housing units, you now would have the ability to say, great, we'll waive the impact fees because you're building the sort of stuff that we need or the density that we need. So it's a modern day tool to develop and direct your development, but not pass on to the existing tax base all the things that are going to be required from that growth.
Well, can I say this real quick?
Sure.
When we were talking about the impact fees, the one thing that I wanted to stress was they are a good revenue resource, right? But they should never be a deterrent for development. And
okay.
the pros and cons are, hey, this is a good revenue stream for outside developers. This is a great way to raise revenue and not create a strain on our present day tax payers. So we're getting revenue from outside of the county to help us with county initiatives. But if it becomes an issue where it slows down or decreases development, then we have to look at them in a different way.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Let me move on to the subject of affordable housing. In SPLOST 7, which we all voted on last November, voters approved pretty significantly the collection period for SPLOST 7, and Savannah included in their list $10 million for affordable housing from their portion of the SPLOST 7 proceeds. Chatham County did not include any affordable housing funding in their list. Brian, since we're with you, would you ensure that the next SPLOST cycle has some set-asides from SPLOST for affordable housing?
Yes. I mean, it's very, very clear that all over the United States, and not exclusive to Chatham County, we have a affordable housing conflict. And we've got to make sure that we create affordable housing within unincorporated areas so that we can meet the housing demands. That's something that maybe needs to be looked at from a different perspective on how much we actually set aside for that. But at the same time, it's a necessary response to a housing crunch on affordable housing that has gotten way out of hand. I mean, we literally, and I'm going to go somewhere else. We literally have people in San Francisco that make $100,000 a year that are homeless.
Right.
I mean, we cannot become that type of area in Chatham County. So we got to create revenue or create some type of means for a pathway to affordable housing.
Great, thank you. Aaron, what's your take? Would you throw some money in the next SPLOST to affordable housing initiatives to keep pace?
Well, theoretically, but understanding that this next term, I wouldn't have that. We wouldn't be the ones voting on that. So
no, you wouldn't. It's a philosophical question, to be sure.
Right.
6 years out.
Right. So with that being said, I personally believe that affordable housing, it needs to be fostered through a collaboration of all of the municipalities as well as the county. So what I would look to do is to create those avenues, foster the camaraderie amongst the municipalities to have that conversation. So then when the next SPLOST comes, it is not a surprise that it's on the table. That we all should be chipping in. Everybody should be chipping in.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Thank you. I got two questions, and we're done. The County Commission makes several appointments to the Savannah Economic Development Authority Board. CEDA puts together deals to attract new businesses to our county, and those deals are very generous, including property tax abatements. The deals are done in exchange for new job creation, but CEDA never verifies that the number of jobs that were promised by the developer are in fact created. would you require CETA to audit those contracts with their clients to verify that job creation? Let's go up to Brian and handle that question there, Brian.
I don't know if I would require CETA to audit them, but it may be beneficial that all municipalities, including the county, has an outside auditor to keep us honest.
Okay.
So that way, you know, CETA wants to bring the deal so that we get the development we need in the area, right? But we need an outside independent auditor to find out whether or not the deal we actually made had a return on investment that was beneficial to the area. So maybe not CETA doing the auditing, but maybe an outside contractor, independent contractor, say, hey, we need to find out whether or not we actually put a deal together that was beneficial to the residents of Chatham County.
Yeah, thank you. I think I didn't mean to suggest that we'd allow CETA to do their own audits. So your point is spot on. Aaron, what's your thought about?
Yeah, I think that would need to be on us as the county. We need to, if we are the ones who are giving out that tax break, just as the same as the municipalities, if we're giving out tax breaks with an expectation of something, then we need to be accountable to the taxpayers and make sure that we're monitoring that. So yes, I would support auditing. I'm surprised that that's not a thing, and that's kind of unfortunate, you know. But I think that we should take on that responsibility and have somebody within, you know, the county, if that's the entity, or the municipalities, you know, whomever it is, we need to do that auditing as far as job creation. Have an independent auditor for the finances.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Listen, I'm going to, since we're just a few minutes away from the time, top of the hour that we promised, I'm going to hold my last question. To conclude, how did you guys feel about this exchange of ideas on policy?
I thought it was good. I love these types of conversations because in reality, to make positive change in our community, we have to talk about policy. It's not about who's like the best and this and that and the third. If you can be a great person but have no substance and get into a seat and not do anything but go with the flow. And so it's going to take people who are willing to kind of challenge that status quo in a sense and be willing to push policy ideas. Sometimes they might work, sometimes they might not. But if we miss 100% of the shots, we don't take. The one thing, if I had anything that I didn't necessarily like was that we were kind of rushed. But all things considered, you know, things didn't work out how we wanted to with technology today.
They did not. But thank you for your patience. And would you do this again, Aaron?
Absolutely.
Terrific. Thank you. Brian, your closing thoughts and how did we do, and would you do this again?
First off, yes, I would do it again. I'm honored that you asked me to participate. And to be honest with you, I think the questions were really, really good questions. They're questions that needed to be brought up and they needed to be answered. I think that more than anything else is that we needed fresh eyes. We need fresh eyes to look at solutions that maybe we didn't look at before. You know, I'm a minister, so I read the Bible a lot, right? So I've learned to read the Bible a specific way as a newspaper. And when a newspaper has fresh information every day. So when I read the Bible, I read it with fresh eyes every day, and I may see something I didn't see before. And we need a fresh perspective as far in lieu of the county, city, municipalities, and really the state. So when we begin to come up with ideas that may work, may not work, may work partly, or may work all the way, we need a collaboration of, hey, we need to get it done. You know, it's really not about running for office. It's really about being effective with the responsibility that the people have given you after you are elected.
Very good.
That's what it's about.
Very good.
And I'm hoping that, you know, we get excited about running, and I'm honored to run, and I'm honored to run against anyone and all the other participants who are running for office. My hats goes off to them because
Indeed.
They're actually out there putting themselves out there.
It's not
easy.
easy.
It's not easy. It's about being effective after the win. And that's really what it's about. And I want people to understand that we got to be effective with the leadership that people have given us to do in the governing that people have asked us to participate in.
Great. Thank you, guys. I wish you the very best in your campaigns and your elections. Stay safe, stay home, and together we'll get through this. And I look forward to talking to you again. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.